Now we've got that going, and so we can start to add some other objects too. I can use my rectangle tool and draw something out up here. I think I want a dark, heavy, sort of a heavy edge. I don't want it to be that thick. I can go ahead and let's take the border off and let's make it a black fill. Okay, and I think that I want to maybe make it not that big, maybe somewhere in the ballpark of 20 pixels. We'll just see how that looks. So that it's kind of got a nice top heavy border that mimics some of the black that's in the logo. And then if I click and hold shift, and if I hold shift and then option is going to duplicate. Shift is going to constrain it to the vertical axis. Okay, and then I think that that's way too heavy, so maybe on this one that's highlighted, I can change that to maybe 10 and see how that looks. And then we can either use our nudge keys to arrow down, or we can just drag it and have it snap right to the spot. And then I can make a decision if that's too thick. I think it still might be too thick. Let's try like 5 and see how 5 looks. And let's just use our nudge keys here. And I can zoom in, and it looks like that's the right spot for it. Okay, and so that line might be a little bit better, and then I can duplicate that yet again if I want to have another one at the bottom, and maybe I'll leave that the same. But here's the thing, I actually want this blue to be on top. I'm going to zoom in again. I want the blue to be on top. So what I can do is go over here to Object, and I can go to Arrange, and I can say Bring to Front, and now it's on top of both of them. Okay, and so I think I might be okay with the way that that looks for now. All right, and so the next thing is that I can add some text, and here's where I can take the text tool over here. And first of all, let's go ahead and add this text. Oh, sorry. Just if I can just click there, I'm just going to paste it in so you don't have to watch me type. But basically what it says is 24/7 residential and commercial electrical service. And I think I might like to have a period at the end. And I want that to be black so that it fits with the logo better. So I can just go over here and choose black for my color. The other thing too that you'll notice is that I don't have, right, it's Helvetica Neue is what it's defaulting to. Okay, and so I need to choose my font. This is why it was so important for you to install your fonts already. So I'm going to choose this as Oswald, not Osaka, sorry, Oswald. All right, and I'm going to just leave it as regular Oswald, even though I have light and bold as options. So yeah, so I think I'm going to just have that the way that is right there, and maybe I'll bump it over. Nope, I think it looks better right there. And I think that I'd like for it to be more justified with the words Canon Electric. So I'm going to adjust this so that it's slightly smaller, like maybe in the ballpark of 18, maybe 19. I think 18 is going to be the right size for this. And this is one of the things that's nice. You can actually adjust the kerning, or the tracking. So I'm going to go, let's just add 5, and then that bumps it out a little bit, and that just adds a little bit of space in between the letters so that it becomes more justified looking. Right, and this is something, by the way, that you could do in your regular website. It does allow for tracking kerning. Okay, and I'll bump that up. And so I think I like the way that that looks, and then I can come over here and start adding my links. Now, one of the other things that I can do is I could select this, and now I've got this as a style. I could go over here and create a character style, and I might as well. So that's Oswald at 18 points, and it's regular. So now whenever I need to choose something that's Oswald, I can just go ahead and click that instead of having to, go do the drop down every time. And then I just might have to change the type size. So I'm going to create a new, like a link here, and I want to do, it's going to be, I think I would like for these to all be uppercase. And I'm going to go ahead and choose the Oswald style because I know that I want my links to be Oswald. And I can change the color in this case up here to white. All right. because I think I'd like for them to be white. If not white, I might have them be, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. This is one of those things that we could do where we take this and tell it to be that color, right? And I don't know, I'm not sure that I like that. I might like it better as white. I can also take that and see if it's any different as that color. And that's a little yellow. And so that might be okay, but I still think I might like the white best, right? And then I can play around with it later. And then, and what's also nice is that I can adjust this. Let's try like a 20 point size. And I can keep playing around with the size here until I get to something I like. I think that's a little bit big. The hierarchies, it's almost approaching the size of the logo, so I think that's a bit large. So I think maybe we can go somewhere around ballpark of 19 or 20. All right. And then I can take this, I can click it, hold it, and then if I do shift, it'll constrain it. As I move it, an option will start to duplicate. So I can choose to just drop it around there, and I know I'm going to have something called services. Now, I want to show you something. Look, right now, these are left justified. I probably want to make these center justified, and I'm going to take that and make it services. Okay, and then it will come out from the center, and then you can decide if that's something that you want to do or not. And then let's take this word, and I think that one of the other things was going to be about us. All right, and then let's go ahead, and I'm going to shift and drag. I'm not doing the option key yet. All right, let's do that. Now I'm going to do option shift drag, and here we can have FAQs. Okay, and then now I need to drag this one back. Oops, not option. There we go. And I think that the other thing we had was a contact page. So contact. I can double check all of this. Let's drag that out with the shift key. And so there are our links. And if I wanted to double check that, I can come up here, and so we've got, oh, discounts. It was discounts. Although a contact page is probably a good idea too, right? So let's call this, I'm just going to copy that. Let's call this discounts. And now we can option drag out. Okay. All right, so now we've got our links all set up. All right. And I think that that is probably a good start. I'm going to go ahead and save what I've got so far. The other thing that you can do too, just so you know, is I can go ahead and hold down the shift key, select all of these, and if I do command or control G, I can group them. It's also available up here, object group. And so now whenever I move these, I select them, I select it as a whole unit, and I can move it as a whole unit. So if I decide, you know, I really prefer that over here, you know, on the right end or something, if I scroll that down, you know, I might decide that I like it over there, whatever. Okay, but this is the way that you can start to mess around with that, right? And then when you start to group things together, like I could group these two things together, right, so that they stay put, and so on and so on. I can also group the entire heading or header section if I want. I'm not going to, but I could. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and give this thing a background image, because I think that I want the page to have a background image. Oops, didn't mean to do that. So I'm going to import that. I'll go over here to File, and I'll say Import. And I'm going to look inside of my Canon Electric site, original documents, and I'm going to look inside of images, and I think it's this one that I kind of like as a big background image. The resolution's good enough to support. These are all pretty small. I mean, I guess I could do something really industrial, but I think that this one might get kind of lost and look a little funny on the edges and stuff. I think that this graphic will have a really nice texture even when it's really big and kind of blurred out. It'll be fine. So I'm going to choose that one, and I'm going to go ahead and here's the thing I want to do. I want to actually have it go all the way to the top, because in reality, that's what it would actually be doing. I want to see how it's really going to look on a regular web page, it would start in the top left corner if I were to have this as a body background. So I'm going to scale it out holding shift so that it stays proportional. And what you might look at, right, is you might see this and go, okay, well, that's as big as it needs to be because that's the size of the viewport. And yeah, that's true, right? That it would be the size of the viewport. And the reality is that it would be centered, so you'd drag it up holding the shift key so that it hits those center lines. The other thing though that you're going to find is that later whenever we go to look at this and we're putting other stuff on top of it and you wanted to see like a scroll view, you're going to find that it's sort of a weird, inconsistent kind of look and feel. So there's some other things that we can do to extend this, but for right now what I'll do is I'll take this selection and I go over here to object and I need to go to where it says arrange and I need to say send to back because it needs to go back behind everything. All right. And then whenever I click off of there, you see that it conforms itself to the scale of the viewport. Now, if you wanted, the other thing you could do, if you said, you know, I really like this tool, but I want it, you know, I want it to be lower. One of the other things that you could do is if you did select that image, you could drag it down so that it always starts at the top of the page. And then you'll have to make a note so that you remember that that image is always going to have to be at the top of the page, and so you would have to tell it in the CSS that that's where you want it to start. If you did also want it to start down here, then you would have to do something a little bit different. I'm going to suggest that you just keep it simple and go ahead and map it to whatever the full page would be. All right, and so that might be a little bit better. Now, the other thing that I need to, and I'll show you in a minute about the scrolling of the page, but one of the things that I want to have happen is I want some boxes to be like featured boxes, and I want them to show up right here, but I think I'd like to have it in kind of like a consistent white background box that you can sort of just see through a little bit. And that would be based off of some simple sketches that I did and some things that I was thinking about doing. So if I do something like that, I want to go over here now to take my rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw a box that maybe starts to align like with this edge. Okay, so if I do that and I want to try to keep my boundaries or gutters margins basically consistent, so I'm going to hold down the shift key as I draw this. Actually, I'm sorry, not the shift key, I apologize. And then I'm just going to draw this out so that it would take up the right amount of space, and somewhere in that ballpark probably. I think maybe like that's about right, but I'd probably want to make this like a not like a 782, but let's try like 785, like just pretty straightforward number. And then I could take my arrow tool and make sure that that's centered so that my margins are even. And now I don't know if this is the right height. I might need to adjust the height. So, but before I do anything else, I can go ahead and change this so that my, first of all, I don't want to fill on it. Okay. And then secondly, I would like if I go here to this fill, I would like to change this so that I can lower the opacity. So I could either drag the slider or I could put in an actual value. So you can drag the slider if you're not sure how you want it to look. And I'm thinking somewhere in the ballpark of like maybe 90%, right? It could be lower than that, it could be higher than that, however you end up thinking it looks right later, because you want to make sure that any text that goes on top is readable. The other thing too that I want to do is I want to have a heading inside of this box that shows that it's feature heading, but I think I've pretty much decided that on a screen this dimension, I might like to have my feature boxes be around 500 wide, roughly. So if I've got, this is 1785, that gives me like 1500 pixels. I think that might give me good margins in between. So let's just start to ballpark it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a box in the center. I'm just going to draw this box, and then what I'll do is, my idea is I'm thinking it might be 500 by 500, let's say, if I want these to be square. Okay, and the first thing you'll notice, right, is that if I place that with a margin that sort of looks like decent, right, then it doesn't give me a lot of space up here. So maybe what I want to do is actually lower this. And don't worry, I know that this is the fold. It's okay, because I can always, like I said before, I can make this so that it's scrollable. So let's say that, you know, I don't want the margin that's down here to be too disproportionate to this margin. So I'm thinking something maybe in that ballpark might be okay. We'll try that. And that gives me room for a title up here, and then I can always move the whole thing if I need to. Um, and if you decided that this was too big, you wanted to make it smaller, you could make it smaller. But so let's say then I'm not going to duplicate this. I can duplicate it, but just for, you know, trying to mess around with it and see what it looks like and see, you know, that this is probably a pretty good feature size so that I can have some featured things here. Like maybe I could have an image with a title and then like a little call to action or description at the bottom, so that these could be clickable things, or they could just be, you know, advertisements. Like you could have an icon here that, you know, is like says something about good service. It could be some sort of service icon. Maybe another could be, you know, like some kind of piggy bank or something like that, that, you know, it says that we're affordable or whatever, and then maybe a clock or something that says that we're timely. It could be lots of different things up here in this feature section, but let's just say that these are some of the things that I'm thinking about doing. I think that that's a pretty good size. I think that I'm pretty good with that. But before I do anything else with these boxes, I want to make a title up here. So I'm going to go over here to my text tool, and if I wanted, actually, what I could do, well, I'm going to take my text tool, all right, and I'm going to click right here, and actually I'm going to click in the center right here. So, because I want this text to be centered, and I'm going to go over here immediately, and I'm going to click on the center button so that it will start typing right away from the center. And I will go ahead and tell it that I want it to be Oswald, like that. And I think 20 is definitely going to be too small. Let's try something around, I don't know, 45. And I'm going to give it a different color. Let's say that we want the color to be this bright blue, the brighter version of the blue, and we can type in something like San Diego. Oops. Oh, and my bad. Before I start, I guess I'm going to have to highlight it and change this over here, so then you can see that it doesn't always pick up exactly the way you want. So you could say San Diego's, here, let's do this, San Diego's best electricians or something like that. You could always change this. And then I'm going to go ahead and go down to the next line and say, give us a call. Give us a call today. And then maybe if I wanted, I could put some number. So, you know, 555-555-5555, something like that. All right. So I'm going to highlight this top part, and let's go back over here. Like I said before, I'm going to start to type the word Oswald, and we're going to put this at, like, let's try 45. And I'm going to keep it regular. I don't think I want it to be bold. Yeah, I think that might be too heavy in comparison, so let's do regular. And we can go ahead and click on that, and then that starts to come together a little bit. And you might look at this and then compare it to, say, the Canon Electric icon up here, and you might decide that this is like a little bit, it might be a little bit too dominant. This text is actually larger than the text up here, so you want to keep your hierarchy in check. Let's try and see what happens at 40, and that might be a little bit better. You could even maybe try going a little smaller. If that is that scale, I think this needs to be a little bit bigger. So let's try and see what like 25 does, and let's see what 30 does. There, yeah. And this is Helvetica Neue, so we need to change that. Here, let's change that because I don't want it to be Helvetica Neue. Let's try Railway, since Railway is our other font that we're using. And let's try 30 for both of those. Okay, we'll do Railway regular. And so now we've got something that looks like this. And I could come in here where it says give us a call today, and I can choose to make that a darker color. I could have it be like that color, blue, or if I want to keep it in the gray family, I might just come down here and do something that's not totally dark, but that, you know, is sort of in that range, and see how that looks. All right, and I might be okay with this for right now. And you want to kind of be careful and pay attention to your margins. So from here to here should be at least the same as here to here. So maybe these boxes need to come down a little bit. I'm going to use my nudge tools to bump those down. And then if I do that, I think probably this box needs to be just a little bit bigger, maybe somewhere in that ballpark, so that there's a little bit more weight at the bottom. And I think I might be okay with this. Let's nudge that down just a little bit. So if that's, it looks like, see it's showing a number up here, it says 36 pixels. You know, I could, if I wanted it, if it was important to me that it was an even number, you know, it could be. And then I could see here, that's 63 at the bottom. So I think I could probably come down a little bit more even. And that's probably pretty good right there. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to show, let's go ahead and use this one on the left right here to create, you know, a title and some kind of icon placeholder and some text underneath. So if one of the things that I can do here is I'll go ahead and create, well, first of all, let's create the placeholder for the icon. So I'm going to go dead center and I'm going to kind of just make my icon about, maybe about somewhere in the ballpark of that big, right? It could be like slightly smaller, I guess, somewhere like that. And then I'm going to get rid of the border and just, I'm going to give it a fill of something that's kind of dark. So that this is just, as I said before, it's a placeholder for an icon. All right, so now that we've got that made, I'm going to go ahead and create a title up here. So let's take our text tool, and again, I'm going to click in the center, and I'm just going to type a word. So I'll type the word F, and I'm going to highlight it so that I can go ahead and assign Oswald to it, make it center based, and tell it that, I don't know, let's try something like 35 pixels or something like that, and we'll go ahead and try something like the word feature. Okay, and it didn't take again. All right, so I guess go ahead and type the stupid word, but it did take the center part. So let's do 35, and I'm going to move it up. I don't know if 35 is what I want. Let's just move it up. But I do want to keep in mind like a hierarchy of elements so that it's not, you know, so big that it starts to really compete with this title up here. And, you know, this might even be a little bit big because I still feel like that is a little competitive. So let's maybe this should be somewhere in the ballpark of 35. Yeah, maybe that should be 35, or even let's try 37. That's a little bit better. So that now this relationship is not so bad. So let's try this at 34. All right, and it's a little bit smaller. So we might look at that and see how we feel about that. This still does feel a little diminutive. It's a little small for me, and I just realized that had an extra space in it. So let's try that, and let's go back to 35. Yeah, 37. I guess we want these two to be the same. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make where we've got here, I'm going to go ahead and make that character style, so that is clear that that's something we can just grab. And then maybe where it says give us a call today, let's look at that rule. That was railway at 30. Okay, so the other thing I want to do is I'm just going to take this and I'm going to drag it down with Shift and Option, and I'm going to drop it there, and I'm just going to change this so that it's railway, and let's do it so that it's lowercase, and we can also change the color. I think I want this to be, you know, like, let's do, I think that's what we had before for this color. And I don't want it to be uppercase. Let's do something like this is a feature box. And I don't think I like the text that big, right? I want it to maybe be, let's see what 30 looks like. And that's a little bit better in terms of the scaling. And, you know, something could go here, a sentence or maybe 2 sentences. So you would have to kind of figure out what kind of things you wanted to go there in order to style it. Just because this is a demo and I'm kind of doing this quickly, I want to be a little more succinct. I might even bump this up just a little bit. Let's see if I bump it up. Yeah, and that might give me room for something to wrap here, you know, if I wanted to have a second line. And that might be an okay thing. Now, I've got this kind of set up, and if I like this, you know, let's lift that up just a little bit. I think I like that. So if I like this box as a sort of a base, now what's really cool is I can make something that's a repeatable element in XD, right? So if I take this and this and this and this, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna group this, all right, so that this becomes one object. And so if I can come up here and you can do group, or I can do Command G if you're on Windows, Control G. All right, and so now I've got this thing. If I select it, it becomes a grouped element, all right, and it selects everything that's within that group. If I select this at this point now, I can come over here and say repeat grid. All right, and then you see you get these two little handles, and I could repeat the grid in this direction, or which is down, or in the left-right direction. So if I take this and I drag it over, you see that it'll actually repeat my grid for me. Now you might look at that and go, wait a second, it's off. It's not lined up with where the other boxes are. If I hover over this, I can click and drag the margin area so that it starts to align with the other one, right? And so I can kind of just make sure that it's even, equidistance, and I can drop that, and I can close this up a little bit, and there we go. I've got something that's got a repeated grid feature. And if later I decided to change my format so that it had more than 3, I could just grab this repeat grid and I could drag it down as well, which is really cool. Okay, now I'm just going to grab this and I'm going to move it down for just a second. Actually, I'm going to move it down with my nudge keys and holding down Shift, and I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, just enough so that I can grab the objects that are underneath and delete them. And now I can grab this and go Shift 1, 2, 3, and it's back where it was. Okay. Now the next thing that I could do, right, is I can see what this page would look like if I were to scroll it. The only thing is, like, you know, it's hard for me to see what's happening here. If I just tried to scroll it right now, I wouldn't be able to, because I haven't changed the length of my artboard. So if I click on the artboard name up here, you see you get these little handles for the artboard all the way around the artboard. In order to get this, you have to click on the artboard name. And now if I drag this down, I could start to see how the page would look if it were scrolled. So, you know, and I might look at this and go, you know, this bottom box, maybe it needs a little bit more dimension at the bottom. You know, maybe it just needs a little bit more weight since I have this space up here. I don't know, right? I could do something like that. And then whenever I click this artboard again, over here on the right, you'll see where it says scrolling. You can choose whether it does no scrolling or if it's vertical scrolling. And it also tells you that the standard viewport height is 1080. So remember, because we did 1920 by 1080. And so now if I wanted, and I went and I hit play, you can see that it allows me to scroll. The other thing that I noticed that I didn't notice in my other view is that it's just now starting to repeat that grid item right here. And so maybe I need to close that up just a little bit. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to kind of scroll in or bump this up, click that, and I'm going to start to close the item so that that doesn't show. All right. And then the other thing I can do too is I want to make sure that this is dead center, right? And that's where it's showing as dead center. And part of it is because it's seeing this margin here. So if I close this up to the element, now I go to find center, it puts it center. All right. So that's how you can center something that's got a repeated grid. Now, the thing is, you might look at this and, you know, one of the things you'll notice is this dotted blue line right here that you see. I'm moving my cursor around on top of it. That dotted blue line represents the bottom of the viewport. And you'll notice that in order to fill the entire space with this background image, the background image, it extends beyond the viewport. Just so you know, realistically, what would end up happening is, well, and here's the other thing, is that if you'll notice that if I go to click on this artboard and then I go to click play, when I scroll, you see that it continues to scroll as long as I drew out the artboard. And one of the things you'll see is that, like, if let's say that the artboard actually ended right here, right? So it ended right there. You know, realistically, when I scroll, the background image, if I don't have it set to scroll with the page, the background image is going to stay exactly the way that it is. See, right now the background image is actually scrolling, and you'll also notice that the background image is not filling the rest of the page that I designated as a legitimate continued part of the page. So that's sort of a problem, because in order for me to actually be able to see the entire page and what it looks like with a full background image, I would have to literally take this picture and just keep making it bigger and bigger and bigger, holding down shift. Like, it'd have to get really, really big in a way that it actually wouldn't be, if I do undo, it wouldn't actually be that big in the real viewport. It would actually be this big, because it's only gonna, the background image is only gonna scale whenever you use the property of background size equals cover. It's only gonna fill up the actual viewport space, right? And the viewport space ends at this dotted line. So it's not like it fills everything else that is in the area to come when you scroll. It only fills from the top of the viewport to the fold and to the sides. So that's one of the things that is sort of a problem I see still with XD, at least as it is right now.